Welcome to TOCHI Stories. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on post notification because it will mean the whole world to me. Now let's get right into the story. Brace yourself. The cock crowed weakly outside the dusty window of their one-room apartment, where the ceiling leaked when it rained and the walls bore cracks of age. Chidinma stretched from her mat on the floor, careful not to wake Obinna, who lay beside her snoring, his worn-out wrapper barely covering his legs. The air was still, the heat stifling, and the scent of kerosene mixed with mildew reminded her of the life they shared. It was not a palace, but for years she found contentment in the sacrifices they made for each other. She woke early every day to prepare akara and pap, which she hawked around the local market square before the sun reached its peak. She used the little she made to buy foodstuffs, and saved small change in a plastic bottle under the bed. Obinna, though jobless for now, was a dreamer. He spoke passionately about his future plans, starting a logistics business, owning trucks, building their own house, even traveling abroad. He called her my queen, and in those moments of whispered dreams in the dark, she felt seen. But love, she had learned, doesn't fill empty stomachs or fix broken roofs. Most evenings they shared a plate of gari and groundnuts, laughing and pretending it was jollof rice. On some days, when Obinna returned from his futile job hunts, Chidinma would massage his feet, soothe his frustrations, and remind him that his breakthrough would come. She believed in him even when the world didn't. Her neighbors mocked her for staying with a lazy man, and some whispered that she was wasting her beauty and youth. But Chidinma didn't listen. Her faith in Obinna was unshaken. When she fell sick from exhaustion one evening, Obinna sold his old phone to buy her medicine. That gesture renewed her strength, making her feel like a queen again, not because of the gift, but because he chose her health over his comfort. Their bond, though wrapped in poverty, seemed solid, tested by hardship and sealed by loyalty. What she didn't know was that love built on struggle could be tested by success. And as fate would have it, change was slowly creeping into their lives. One morning, while delivering food to a catering client, Obinna met Amanda, the beginning of a storm Chidinma never saw coming. Amanda, the sharply dressed daughter of a top business tycoon, was everything Chidinma was not: polished, influential, and rich. She was captivated by Obinna's raw charm, his tall frame, deep voice, and ambitious tone. She offered him her card, suggesting they talk business. Obinna returned home that day glowing, talking about big connections and new doors opening. Chidinma smiled with him, unaware that Amanda wasn't just opening doors. She was unlocking a future that would soon push Chidinma out completely. Rain battered the rooftops like the heavens were weeping as Chidinma sat cross-legged in their tiny room, sewing a torn wrapper to resell for small change. Obinna had just come home with big news. Amanda had introduced him to her father, who was offering him a minor logistics role in one of his branches. Chidinma clapped excitedly, dancing barefoot on the cold floor. She cooked the last cup of rice they had and even borrowed seasoning cubes from their neighbor to make it taste better. That night, she knelt beside Obinna as he made plans, helping him pick out what shirt to wear to his new office, even though it was faded. She offered him her last N2000, money she'd been saving to buy another basin for her akara business, so he could fix his shoe. "It's our blessing," she told him, "and what's mine is yours." Her joy was pure. Her sacrifices, unknown to many, were deep. Chidinma once walked barefoot to deliver akara at a corporate building where she fainted from hunger. She once turned down help from a persistent admirer just to remain loyal to Obinna. In the weeks that followed, Obinna transformed. He started wearing better clothes, courtesy of Amanda's influence. He began speaking differently, switching between English and business jargon he picked up at work. He came home late, smelling of expensive cologne that Chidinma hadn't bought. When she asked about it, he brushed her off with cold indifference. Slowly, their morning talk stopped. He began criticizing her appearance, calling her too local, and not fit for the kind of life he now lived. The same Chidinma who used to massage his feet was now told to sleep on the mat because he needed rest. She endured it all, clinging to the memories of their shared struggle, believing it was just stress from his new job. She didn't want to suspect the worst, that another woman was pulling his heart away. Even when the food she cooked was untouched and his phone became more guarded than usual, she told herself it was temporary. Then one night the bomb dropped. Obinna came back drunk, threw her bag on the floor, and screamed that he was tired of living with a liability. She was 2 months pregnant, and he knew it. Yet he looked her dead in the eyes and said, "I don't want to be tied down with a child from someone who doesn't fit into my future." Chidinma's heart shattered like glass. She dropped to her knees, begging him, reminding him of all they had endured. She reminded him of how she fed him, loved him, prayed for him, and suffered just to see him succeed. But his face was stone. "Amanda is taking me places," he said, "and you're only dragging me back." He opened the door and dragged her out into the night. The same woman who once gave him hope now stood in the rain with a swollen belly, abandoned like a forgotten dream. Amanda's mansion stood like a palace in the highbrow area of town, a world far removed from the rusted zinc rooftops and muddy compounds Chidinma once called home. Obinna adjusted quickly to this new life: chauffeured cars, champagne at brunch, and silk bedsheets that smelled of lavender. Amanda's father gave him a company car and upgraded his salary. He wore suits now, matching her elegance, and together they became the picture-perfect couple on social media. Their love was plastered across Instagram feeds. Boat cruises in Lagos, candlelit dinners in Dubai, luxury shopping sprees. Amanda bought Obinna a gold watch worth more than Chidinma's entire business. When people asked where his wife was, Obinna would laugh and say, "She was never really a wife, just a phase in my struggle." Amanda giggled each time, satisfied that she had erased another woman from his history. And Obinna? He buried his guilt under silk shirts and red wine. Meanwhile, Chidinma wandered the streets barefoot, her body aching and her heart shattered. She knocked on old friends' doors, only to be turned away. Some feared Amanda's influence, others didn't want to get involved. She eventually found shelter in an abandoned building near a construction site. Every night, she slept on cold concrete, her hands wrapped around her growing belly like armor. She fed on leftover food from a bukka down the road, often exchanging labor for scraps. But even in the darkness, she talked to her unborn child, telling the baby that they would survive. She remembered Obinna's face in those dark nights, the man she once loved, now living in splendor while she bathed in gutters. Yet she refused to curse him. Instead, she prayed for strength. The pain birthed resilience, and from that place of abandonment, something strong began to grow inside her. Months later, as the skies poured down heavily one evening, Chidinma went into labor beside a mechanic shop. Strangers gathered, unsure of what to do. An elderly woman rushed out, spread wrappers on the ground, and helped her deliver a baby girl. The first cry of Zara sliced through the night like a promise. Chidinma looked into her daughter's eyes and knew that she had found a reason to live again. With nothing to her name but a newborn and a worn-out wrapper, she swore under that rainy sky, "My child, you will rise, and one day the world will hear your name." She named her Zara, a name that would one day echo far beyond the streets where she was born. Obinna's success expanded like a wildfire. One contract led to another, and before long, his name was on lips that once never acknowledged him. He moved into Amanda's family estate and began attending elite social functions, shaking hands with politicians and top CEOs. With Amanda by his side, he began living a life he once only fantasized about. The young man who used to struggle for transport fare now rolled up in a black Mercedes with tinted windows and designer suits. At every gathering, Amanda introduced him as the man she believed in, and Obinna soaked in the applause like a sponge. But as the money poured in, the man Chidinma once knew began to fade completely. His conscience, once sharp and grounded in gratitude, drowned in luxury. He bought new phones, changed his number, and deleted every photo he ever took with Chidinma. When a former friend asked him about his wife, Obinna responded casually, "She left a long time ago. She couldn't keep up." Amanda's influence was intoxicating. She wasn't just a lover. She was a gatekeeper to everything Obinna ever craved: influence, wealth, admiration. She introduced him to a lifestyle where appearance mattered more than character. Obina learned quickly that vulnerability was weakness, that pain was something poor people wore openly, but rich men masked with confidence and wine. Amanda's circle of friends pampered him, often gifting him luxury watches or grooming kits, referring to him as Amanda's boy. Amanda herself changed him, teaching him how to speak fluently, eat with a knife and fork, even how to cross his legs like a man of power. And while he embraced all these upgrades, he never once paused to wonder what became of Chidinma. His conscience had been overwritten by compliments, clout, and the thrill of now being somebody. Back in the shadows of that glittering city, Chidinma carried the weight of survival like a second pregnancy. Each day brought a new battle. She tied Zara to her back with an old wrapper and swept compounds for N500, washed clothes for strangers, and sometimes sold sachet water under the scorching sun. Every day, as she passed flashy cars and elegant couples holding hands, her heart bled silently. There were days she wanted to scream, days she wondered if Obina ever thought of their child. But she kept moving, not for herself, but for Zara. At night, when she returned to their small corner in the abandoned structure, she hummed lullabies while tears fell silently down her cheeks. Life had stripped her of everything, pride, comfort, love, but she refused to be defeated. Each time she looked into her daughter's eyes, she saw purpose. She began to believe that maybe, just maybe, her destiny was no longer behind her with Obina, but ahead, wrapped in the arms of the little girl she was raising. It happened on a hot Thursday afternoon. Chidinma returned from washing clothes at a compound in Acadia when she heard whispers from nearby women in the neighborhood. "Isn't that the man who used to sell phone accessories?" one asked. "He's now the in-law of Chief Aluko. He left his old wife, and now he's living the good life." Another chimed in, "He even married the rich man's daughter, Amanda." Chidinma's legs froze. Her bucket dropped. The blood drained from her face as the words repeated in her head like a chant. Married. Amanda? Her chest tightened. She held Zara tighter and rushed to the woman to confirm. It was true. Obina had officially married Amanda in a private court wedding. No invites, no notice, no explanation. He had erased her existence completely. Chidinma returned to her spot in the uncompleted building and sat silently, staring at nothing. She didn't cry. She couldn't. The pain was beyond tears. It was betrayal in its rawest form, not just abandonment, but complete erasure. That evening, she found the courage to go to Amanda's estate, determined to confront Obina. The security men looked her up and down and almost didn't let her in, but her stubbornness wore them down. When she saw Obina coming out of a black Range Rover, holding Amanda's hand, she called his name. Obina. He froze for a second, then turned. Their eyes met. A moment passed. He saw Zara. He saw the worn-out slippers on Chidinma's feet, the wrapper tied carelessly across her chest, and the dust on her legs. Amanda stood beside him in a sleek dress, confused. Chidinma took a step forward. "I came to remind you, this is your daughter," she said. Obina scoffed. "I told you not to come here again," he muttered. "What do you want? Pity? Money? Leave, Chidinma. You're embarrassing yourself." The words cut deeper than a knife. Chidinma looked at him one last time and turned away with dignity, tears burning behind her eyes. Even Amanda looked slightly uncomfortable. But it was too late. The man she once loved no longer existed. Days later, Chidinma sat under a mango tree with her baby, thinking. She thought of the mornings she went hungry so Obina could eat, the night she prayed while he slept, the sacrifices that meant nothing to him now. She decided then that she would stop looking backward. Obina was gone. The betrayal was complete. But life wasn't done with her yet. That same day, while buying soap at a roadside stall, she heard music playing from a nearby studio. Little Zara, then barely 2, started humming along with shocking accuracy. The studio owner heard her, stunned, and invited Chidinma in. "This girl is special," he said. "You don't know what you have." That moment marked the beginning of something new, a destiny Chidinma never expected, all because of the daughter she carried through her darkest storms. Each morning, Chidinma would wake up before the first crow, careful not to disturb Zara, who now slept curled beside her on a folded mat made of sackcloth. She cleaned the little corner they called home with an old broom, spreading newspapers to protect them from the rats that crawled freely through the uncompleted building. She had no electricity, no proper bathroom, and no one to call family. Yet, despite the filth and despair, she kept her head high. She bathed her daughter from a broken bucket, combed her hair with an old toothbrush, and dressed her with pride in borrowed clothes. She didn't just want Zara to survive. She wanted her to thrive. Every step Chidinma took in the dusty streets was fueled by determination to give her daughter a better life, even if it meant swallowing shame every day. At the local laundry spot, Chidinma became known for her strength and honesty. She took on the dirtiest clothes, washing with bruised fingers, scrubbing until her palms bled. The madam at the laundry shop eventually began paying her a bit more, impressed by her resilience. But the insults never stopped. "Now this kind woman man go leave. If it means say she no good for house." She heard it all. Yet she never explained, never defended herself. Instead, she focused on feeding Zara, putting her to sleep, and learning a few tailoring skills from a woman next door. She lived from hand to mouth, but every night she whispered prayers over her daughter, blessing her voice, her mind, her heart. "You will be great," she'd say. "The world will see you. The same world that rejected me." Then came the day that changed everything. The studio owner, Mr. Cunnell, invited Zara to perform at a small children's concert at a local church. Chidinma was nervous, but she agreed. She tied a ribbon in Zara's hair and watched from behind the curtain. As soon as Zara opened her mouth to sing, the entire hall went silent. Her voice was like magic, soulful, powerful, and chilling. Parents began clapping even before she finished. A scout from a talent agency happened to be there that day and immediately approached Chidinma. "Your daughter, she has a gift. We want to sponsor her." That night, for the first time in years, Chidinma cried tears of joy. Everything she suffered, every insult she endured, was now turning into something beautiful. And deep down, she knew, the woman Obinna abandoned would become the woman the world would remember. Amanda's mansion was a castle where no one spoke of pain. Inside her glossy walls, pain was traded for designer clothes, wine, and gossip. Obinna was now a household name in elite circles, not because of his own efforts, but because Amanda paraded him like a trophy. Her father had secured him a managerial position in one of his companies, with a generous salary, allowances, and a company car. Obinna didn't need to lift a finger anymore. He started attending yacht parties, sipping imported whiskey, and staying at luxurious resorts. Amanda gifted him a new iPhone, bought him 2 suits from abroad, and started handling most of his wardrobe choices. To her friends, he was her project, a rough gem she polished into a prince. Together, they traveled to Accra, Dubai, and Nairobi. Every photo posted with perfect filters and cute captions like #miking or #loveupgrade. What Amanda didn't know was that she was also Obinna's upgrade, a ticket to the high life, nothing more. Obinna often found himself comparing Amanda's artificial world to the raw love he once shared with Chidinma. But each time that thought crossed his mind, he drowned it in red wine or replaced it with luxury distractions. Amanda filled his world with comfort, but not peace. She was possessive, calculating, and loved to remind him where he came from. "Without me, you'd still be chasing rats in that ghetto," she'd laugh. Obinna would fake a smile, hiding the sting beneath his breath. Amanda chose what he ate, who he met, and even controlled his money. Yet he stayed because the world saw him as successful. He couldn't bear the thought of returning to the streets or losing face. In public, he was the man who made it. In private, he was Amanda's puppet, groomed, packaged, and kept in a golden cage. But for now, the glitter was enough to blind him. Meanwhile, Amanda's father had plans of his own. He didn't see Obinna as a son-in-law, just an ambitious opportunist who was lucky his daughter had taken a liking to him. So he kept him close, but never gave him full control. When Obinna suggested expanding the logistics branch, Chief Aluko chuckled and dismissed the idea. "Stay in your lane, young man," he said. Amanda began treating him with the same dismissive tone. At first, Obina thought it was stress or mood swings. But then she began traveling without informing him and returning with expensive gifts he knew he hadn't bought. Rumors of Amanda's flirtation with a certain oil magnate began to reach him, but he dismissed them. He reminded himself that he had chosen this life, the money, the comfort, the status, and whatever came with it. But somewhere deep down, a storm was gathering. And though Obina didn't know it yet, everything he built with Amanda would soon begin to crumble. The pain struck like lightning, sharp, sudden, and terrifying. Chidinma was returning from a long day washing clothes, when her water broke right in front of a mechanic shop. She screamed in agony, grabbing a rusty pole for balance. Passers-by froze, unsure whether to help. One woman crossed to the other side of the road, mumbling something about bad luck. Chidinma fell to her knees, panting, sweat soaking her wrapper. A few seconds later, a kind elderly woman from a nearby roadside bookcar rushed out with wrappers and a bowl of warm water. "Hold on, my child. God is with you," the woman said, kneeling beside her. There was no time for a hospital. No time for anything. The mechanics gathered, their oil-stained hands trembling as the old woman took charge. Chidinma's cries echoed through the street, her voice a mix of fear and determination. She remembered Obina. She remembered how he had cast her out. But in that moment, she fought not for herself, but for the life about to emerge. After what felt like eternity, the baby emerged. A girl. Her first cry was strong and beautiful, causing everyone to pause in awe. Chidinma collapsed in exhaustion, tears running down her face, whispering, "Thank you, God," over and over. The elderly woman wrapped the baby with fresh cloth, cut the cord with a kitchen knife disinfected with hot water, and cradled her. "She is beautiful," the woman said. "What will you call her?" Chidinma looked up, weak but smiling. "Zara," she whispered, "because she is light in my darkness." That night, Chidinma didn't sleep. She held Zara close, humming softly. Even though they were surrounded by dust, hunger, and uncertainty, she felt something sacred, purpose. She had brought life into the world alone. No husband, no comfort, just raw courage. And from that moment, she vowed to give her daughter a life better than hers. The next few days were tough. Chidinma's body ached from labor, but she resumed work almost immediately. She strapped Zara to her back and returned to washing clothes. Sometimes she'd pause between jobs just to feed the baby, often using clean rags as diapers. People whispered, some pitied her, others scorned her. "A child with no father," they'd say. But Chidinma stopped caring. She began to understand that strength wasn't about how loud you shouted. It was in how you endured silently. And even in her worst moments, she never regretted keeping the child. Each time Zara smiled or held her finger, it was as though life reminded her that there was still hope. There were nights she had no food, days she walked barefoot, and times she wanted to give up. But Zara gave her reason to keep fighting. That child, born on a sidewalk, had already started changing the world around her. Zara grew quickly, her eyes alert, her voice melodic even as a toddler. She mimicked sounds and turned anything into a drum, tins, buckets, even plastic bottles. At 2, she was humming worship songs better than the church choir. One Sunday morning, Chidinma decided to take her to the local church for a free medical outreach. While they waited for their turn, the choir started rehearsing. Little Zara ran to the front and began singing along. The pastor's wife turned around, stunned. "Whose child is this?" she asked. Chidinma rushed forward apologizing, but the woman smiled and said, "Your child has a gift." That very day, the pastor called one of his members, a studio owner named Mr. Cunnell, who ran a free music training program for underprivileged kids. When he heard Zara sing, he offered to train her for free. "This child is going to shock the world," he told Chidinma. For the first time in years, Chidinma began to see light again. Zara attended lessons weekly, and in just months, her voice became refined. She performed at small concerts and gradually built a fan base. Her videos started circulating on social media, raw clips of her singing barefoot, sometimes in her school uniform, with crowds gathering to cheer her on. One day, A talent scout from a major entertainment agency in Lagos came across her video and reached out. They invited Zara for an audition. Chidinma, though nervous, took the risk. She borrowed transport fare and spent her last N1000 on a neat dress for Zara. They arrived at the studio, and when Zara sang, the judges stared in disbelief. They had never heard anything like her. She was signed immediately, with plans to mentor her and put her on a national children's music talent show. From that moment, life began to shift drastically. Zara went on to win the national talent competition. The prize money was enormous, enough to buy a small house. Sponsors flooded in. Endorsement deals followed. Chidinma opened a fashion line with Zara's branding, turning her sewing skills into a thriving business. The same people who mocked her now smiled at her on the road. She bought land and built a small but beautiful home. Zara's voice wasn't just a talent, it was their salvation. What Obinna threw away had become gold. Chidinma never called him, never mentioned his name. She moved in silence, dignity intact. But deep down, she knew the day would come when the man who abandoned her in the gutter would come crawling, not for love, but for relevance. And on that day, she would be ready. Zara's performance at the National Talent Show was unlike anything the nation had seen. As the spotlight hit her small frame, dressed in a glittering gown stitched by her mother's hands, she opened her mouth and let her voice soar. She didn't just sing, she told stories with every note. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, judges wiping tears as she belted out her final line. It wasn't just a song. It was the cry of a girl born in hardship, wrapped in destiny, molded in struggle. The judges gave her a standing ovation. That night, her name trended across the country. Zara, the voice from the streets. Within hours, her social media accounts exploded. People dug up old videos of her singing barefoot. Bloggers called her the golden voice of Africa. Brands came calling. Endorsements, scholarships, invitations to perform at prestigious events. It was as if the heavens opened at once and poured down blessings. Chidinma watched in awe as her daughter's destiny unfolded like a miracle. She often stood backstage, holding back tears, remembering the nights they begged for food, the days she bathed Zara with rainwater, the humiliations she endured without complaint. Now her daughter was sitting next to governors and business moguls, taking pictures with celebrities and being interviewed on national television. The agency in charge of Zara's brand offered Chidinma a position as Zara's manager, helping her financially and legally protect her daughter's career. Chidinma used the opportunity to start Zarachi Collections, a fashion line inspired by her daughter's name, and her handmade designs began trending in fashion circles. Suddenly, Chidinma had influence, money, and connections. But with every new level they reached, she remained grounded. She taught Zara to be humble, reminding her that their journey began in an uncompleted building, not a mansion. They moved into a new duplex in Lekki, tastefully furnished but not extravagant. Chidinma didn't want to lose herself in the same illusion that destroyed Obinna. Every corner of the house had reminders of their story. Framed photos of Zara's first performance, her old broken toy microphone, and even the wrapper Chidinma used to strap her as a baby. Zara started a school music program for less privileged kids, often telling her story to inspire others. Chidinma, now called Mama Zara by the press, was invited to women's conferences to speak on perseverance. She would look at herself in the mirror, once a rejected woman, now a brand, a respected mother, and a symbol of strength. And through it all, not once did she hear from Obinna. But his silence didn't mean peace. Because not far from their new life, Obinna's world was beginning to crack. Quietly, slowly, but surely. It began with a photograph. Obinna was scrolling through social media during one of Amanda's many business trips when he saw a picture shared by a blog. The rising star Zara and her mother take Lekki by storm. He froze. That face, that child, the eyes, the cheeks, the smile. It was like staring into his own childhood. His hands trembled as he clicked the link. More photos, videos, interviews. Chidinma was there, looking radiant, graceful, and dignified. She spoke with wisdom and poise. The same woman he dragged out into the street like trash. She had transformed. Obina's mind spiraled. The headlines were even more brutal to his ego. Once homeless, now honored. Meet the woman who raised a national treasure alone. His heart thudded violently. For the first time in years, he saw himself through the eyes of the world, not as a boss, not as a man of status, but as a coward who abandoned a queen. He couldn't sleep that night. Amanda was out of town again, and the silence in the mansion felt like punishment. Obina tried to justify his actions to himself. She would have held me back. I did what I had to do. Amanda was the upgrade. But every excuse fell flat. None of Amanda's affection ever felt as pure as what Chidinma gave. He remembered the meals she prepared from nothing, the times she soaked Gary so he could eat rice, the prayers she whispered when he pretended to sleep. His chest ached with guilt. He went into the guest room, opened his drawer, and pulled out an old brown envelope. Inside was a crumpled photo of them when they first moved into the one-room apartment. Her smile back then wasn't wealthy, but it was full of love. Tears slid down his face. He knew he had wronged the only person who ever truly loved him. The next morning, he drove to her new address. Yes, he found it. Wealth has its ways. As he pulled up near her Lekki home, he watched from afar as Zara skipped down the stairs, her security guard carrying her keyboard. Chidinma followed behind, adjusting her daughter's bag, smiling gently. Obina stayed in the car, hidden behind tinted windows. A part of him wanted to rush out and kneel, to say I'm sorry, to touch his daughter. But shame held him back. She looked so fulfilled, so free. What right did he have to disturb that peace? He drove away, heart heavy. For the first time in a long time, Obina realized he was the one left behind. The woman he thought would never rise had not just risen, she had soared. And her success had nothing to do with him. That truth was more painful than any slap. While Chidinma and Zara basked in light, Obina's life began to descend into shadows. Amanda returned from a week-long conference with a new car, a gift from a man Obina had never heard of. Who bought you this? He asked, trying to hide his anger. Amanda laughed. Why? Are you the one paying for it? You forget who put you in that suit, Obina. He wanted to shout, but he swallowed the insult. It didn't end there. At work, Amanda's father was replaced by a new board of directors, and suddenly Obina's privileges began to disappear. First, the company car was withdrawn. Then, his account access was temporarily suspended. Finally, his contract was not renewed. Amanda didn't bat an eye. You're not my responsibility, she said coldly. This is why I told you to invest in yourself, not just lounge around looking pretty. The same Amanda who once called him her king now treated him like an errand boy. The fall was swift and brutal. Obina sold his wristwatches to pay for fuel. Then his iPhone. Then his second-hand Benz. He moved out of Amanda's mansion, relocating to a small rented apartment in Aja. Friends stopped returning his calls. Doors that once opened to his name now remained firmly shut. One day, he went to the old office to plead for a job, but the security guard didn't even let him pass the gate. The guard who used to salute him now smirked and said, Oga, who you dey find? Obina walked away, his pride shattered. Each step echoed with regret. In his silence, he began to hear Chidinma's voice, not in anger, but in those quiet, faithful words she used to say, I believe in you. He had thrown it all away for temporary glory, and now, even that had expired. But karma wasn't finished. Amanda publicly announced her engagement to a wealthy senator. Photos of her bridal shower flooded the internet, each one more mocking than the last. Obina, now jobless and broke, sat in a cramped room staring at the pictures on a borrowed phone. His former mistress had moved on, richer, grander, more powerful. And him? He was a ghost of who he used to be. For the first time, he picked up a pen and wrote a letter, not to Amanda, but to Chidinma. In it, he begged for forgiveness, requested a meeting, and asked to see Zara. But the letter never reached her, because at that very moment, Chidinma was on her way to speak at a global women's conference. And Obina? He was about to learn that some doors, when closed by destiny, never open again. Obina stood at the gate of Chidinma's estate, holding a now wrinkled shirt and a dusty pair of shoes. His hair was unkempt, his eyes tired and sunken. He hadn't eaten since the previous morning, but the hunger in his belly was nothing compared to the ache in his heart. After months of watching his life collapse like a house of cards, he'd finally gathered enough courage to come face to face with the woman he'd abandoned. He stared at the high black gates in front of him, symbols of everything he once desired and everything he no longer had access to. The security man at the gate squinted and asked, "Yes? When you day find?" Obinna cleared his throat. "I'm here to see Madame Chidinma. Tell her it's Obinna." The man chuckled a slow, mocking laugh. "Obinna? The same Obinna that throw her comet when she day pregnant." He walked back into the compound without opening the gate. Obinna stood there humiliated, as voices behind the fence giggled. Minutes later, Chidinma stepped out, flanked by 2 guards. She looked radiant, dressed in a white fitted gown, gold jewelry glinting in the afternoon sun. The elegance she carried was quiet but powerful, the kind of presence only earned through fire. Obinna's lips parted, but no words came. She walked to the gate, but didn't open it. She simply stared at him. "What do you want, Obinna?" she asked, her voice calm, controlled. He stepped forward, trying to hold her gaze. I just wanted to see you, and Zara. Please." His voice cracked. "I'm not here to cause problems. I've lost everything, Chidinma. Amanda left. I'm broke. I have nowhere to go. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm sorry." Chidinma sighed, a deep breath filled with years of memories. "You didn't just abandon me," she said. "You threw away your child. You threw away love. You chose gold over grace. And now you want grace to open its door to you again." Obinna dropped to his knees. "I was blind," he whispered. "Please, just let me see her." Chidinma didn't flinch. "Zara doesn't know you. You've never held her, never fed her, never stayed up when she had fever. I raised her. I fought for her. And I will not let her heart be confused by a man who only shows up after the glory." Her words were final. Obinna lowered his head. The gates closed in his face. And as he walked away, tears sliding down his dusty cheeks, he realized the most painful part wasn't the rejection. It was knowing she had every right to say no. And still, she spoke without hate. That grace, that strength, it was what he'd abandoned. And now, it was too late to reclaim it. Obinna returned to the uncompleted building he now called home, the same place Chidinma once laid her head years ago. Irony hung heavy in the air. He stood in the middle of the cracked concrete, staring at the walls, wondering how she had survived such horror with a baby. Now he slept there too, but unlike her, he had no innocence left. Just regret. Each night, he tossed and turned on a mat donated by a church member, haunted by memories. He remembered when Chidinma used to sing softly in their one-room apartment. He remembered how she cooked jollof rice with firewood during their first Christmas together. The way she cried tears of joy the first time he brought home N10,000. All those moments returned, slicing through his pride like a blade. The woman he once mocked for holding him back had become everything he aspired to be: strong, influential, respected. One night, he walked down to the bridge where he used to dream with Chidinma. They would sit there at dusk, sharing boiled corn and coconut, mapping out their future. Now he sat there alone, ignored by strangers, laughed at by young boys who saw him as just another homeless man. He heard whispers in town of Zara's international deal, of Chidinma's new mentorship program for single mothers, of how her fashion line was expanding to South Africa. The whole city now hailed her as a phoenix, and Obinna couldn't escape her name. It followed him in market conversations, radio jingles, and even in sermons. One preacher said, "Do not despise the woman carrying your destiny in her womb," and Obinna almost fell off his bench. The world had crowned the woman he abandoned, and now he couldn't even afford toothpaste. During one of his restless nights, he wrote a letter. This time, not to beg, but to reflect. He wrote of how he lost himself in the arms of greed, how he watched love walk away, and how he wished he could turn back time. But he knew words meant little now. He folded the letter and buried it under a loose tile in the building. It was the only confession he could leave behind. As he laid back on the cold ground, his chest began to ache, not from hunger, but from heartbreak. He knew now that grace wasn't something you buy or earn through charm. It was something you protect. And he had destroyed his own. In trying to become a king, he had rejected the woman who would have built him a palace from nothing. Amanda's wedding was the final nail in Obinna's coffin. The photos were everywhere. The ceremony held at a luxury beach resort in Ghana. Amanda, stunning in her diamond-embroidered gown, clung to her new husband, a real estate billionaire almost twice her age, but 5 times richer than Obinna ever was. Headlines read, "Amanda Aluko marries Africa's most eligible tycoon." Social media buzzed with posts. Old friends of Obinna posted indirect jabs. One wrote, "Don't lose a diamond chasing rhinestones." Hashtag life lessons. Another added, "Some people were never part of the real story, just temporary chapters." Obinna saw it all. Alone. Broke. In the same dirty singlet he had worn 3 days in a row. He wanted to scream, to curse Amanda, to call the press and expose her. But what would that change? The same people that once hailed him now laughed behind his back. He was now a cautionary tale. Worse still, Amanda gave an interview during her honeymoon where she was asked about her past relationships. She laughed and said, "Oh please, I was just having fun back then. I didn't take anything serious until I met my husband." That statement spread like wildfire. Even street hawkers began mocking Obinna with her words. "Ogafun," they called out as he passed. He became the joke of the city, the man who climbed a ladder and kicked away the woman who held it. Even the mechanics that once admired him now rolled their eyes when his name was mentioned. Obinna stopped going out during the day. He became a ghost in the same city he once ruled with pride. And in the silence of his shame, he finally accepted it. Amanda never loved him. She used him. And when she found someone better, she discarded him like an old newspaper. Days turned into weeks, and Obinna's health began to decline. The heartache, the stress, the rejection, it was all too much. He started having chest pains, but dismissed them. Just small stress, he told himself. But deep down, he knew something was wrong. He had no one to call. No family, no friends. And the one woman who would have sat beside him in a hospital, holding his hand, was now the same woman he once kicked out in the rain. He sat on a concrete block one evening, staring at the setting sun, whispering her name under his breath. Chidinma, but all he heard was the echo of his own regret. The day Zara was invited to perform at the Global Youth Symphony Gala was the day Chidinma realized that her daughter had crossed into history. The event, held in Johannesburg, was one of the most prestigious musical gatherings for young prodigies across the world. Zara had been nominated by her record label after her last album, a soulful blend of African rhythms and modern storytelling, went platinum across streaming platforms. At just 10 years old, her name had become a brand. Her songs spoke of hope, pain, and redemption, often drawing from the raw stories Chidinma shared with her about their past. International media outlets began referring to her as the angel voice from Africa. Invitations flooded in. UNICEF, United Nations cultural panels, and global music awards all wanted a piece of her magic. But it was the gala that would define her legacy. Backstage, Zara sat quietly with her hands clasped, her tiny frame wrapped in a custom-made gown that glimmered like the stars. Chidinma knelt beside her, adjusting her earrings. "Just breathe, my baby," she whispered. "This isn't about showing off. It's about showing the world that miracles come from the places they ignore." Zara smiled, tears glistening in her wide eyes. She knew what tonight meant, not just for her, but for her mother, and for the millions of women and children who were told they were not enough. When the lights dimmed and her name was announced, the entire audience stood in anticipation. She walked to the center of the stage, took a deep breath, and began to sing. Her voice was tender, rising and falling with perfect control, and when she hit the final note, the hall erupted in thunderous applause. Cameras flashed, delegates stood, and a new star had officially been born. But it was her speech afterward that broke the world's heart. Standing before the microphone, her tiny voice steady, Zara said, This award is not mine alone. It belongs to my mother, the woman who carried me on her back through dust and rain, who washed people's clothes to feed me, who never gave up when the world gave her every reason to. My voice is strong because she sang to me with hers, even when she was crying. Mummy, this is for you. Chidinma broke down in the audience, unable to hold back her tears. The moment went viral. People across the globe shared it. Talk shows discussed it. Feminist groups, music lovers, and social activists all rallied behind the message. The story of a woman thrown out and her daughter, who lifted her up, became a global symbol. And though Obinna watched the video on a cracked screen inside a street barbershop, it was clear the child he abandoned had become the voice that now silenced the world. As Zara's face lit up billboards across Lagos and Johannesburg, Obinna's own face became a ghost of his former self. His cheek sunk, his clothes hung loosely on his frame, and he walked the streets like a man searching for the version of himself he lost years ago. Every corner reminded him of what he once had and threw away. He now avoided crowded places. The mockery, the stares, and the pity were unbearable. He tried attending a church once, hoping to find solace, but the pastor used Chidinma's story in his sermon. Never despise the womb that labored for your legacy, the man said, and Obinna had to slip out the back door to avoid being recognized. He no longer bothered looking into mirrors. What was the point? All he saw now was a man aging rapidly under the weight of regret and consequences. His obsession with seeing Zara grew unbearable. He began to follow her interviews, watch every video, scroll through comments. Not out of pride, but out of pain. He knew she was his. He saw it in her eyes, her walk, even her smile. And yet, he was a stranger in her life. He once attempted to attend one of her public performances, but security stopped him at the entrance. "Sir, please step aside." When he insisted, saying he was her father, the guards looked him up and down with skepticism. Her father, one scoffed. "You look nothing like her world." The words stung, but they were true. Obinna was now beneath the very life he once rejected. In his desperation, he wrote another letter and delivered it through a former colleague who now worked as a courier. He begged Chidinma to read it, but she never responded, not because she was cruel, but because she was protecting her daughter from confusion, trauma, and a man who had not earned redemption. One day, Obinna followed Chidinma's convoy from a distance. He waited as her car parked outside a school, where Zara was receiving mentorship from other global figures. As Chidinma stepped out, he rushed forward. "Please, please," he cried. Her guards tried to stop him, but Chidinma raised her hand. She turned and faced him. "I just want to see her," he gasped. "I don't want money. I just want her to know me." Chidinma walked closer. Her face was kind but firm. "You had your chance, Obinna, and not once did you choose her." Obinna dropped to his knees. "I'm dying, Chidinma. I feel it. My heart." She stepped back. "Then spend your last days seeking God, not seeking to rewrite a chapter you burnt." Her voice didn't tremble. It was filled with wisdom and finality. Obinna cried there on the pavement, surrounded by strangers and guards, while Chidinma walked away, not out of hatred, but out of healing. The last time Obinna saw Chidinma, he sat on a concrete slab outside the community health clinic, where he had gone for a checkup. The nurse had told him his blood pressure was dangerously high, and his heart was showing signs of damage. He laughed bitterly after the diagnosis. "Heart damage?" he muttered. "They should have seen when it started, the day I walked away from her." He didn't have money for drugs, so he walked out quietly, carrying his prescription like a ticket to the grave. As he sat outside, holding his chest with one hand and wiping his eyes with the other, he saw Chidinma's NGO team arrive. They were hosting a free medical outreach for widows and single mothers. She stepped out of the branded van, elegant and graceful, in a modest green outfit, with Zara's image printed on the back. Obinna stood and took a few steps toward her. One last time. "Chidinma," he called weakly. She turned. Their eyes met. This time, there were no guards, no camera, just two souls who once shared a dream. "Please," he whispered, "even if it's just to say goodbye." Chidinma walked to him. She saw how frail he had become, how the vibrant man who once commanded attention was now a shadow of himself. "I don't hate you," she said softly. "I never did." Obina's tears returned. "You were the only thing real in my life. And I traded you for lies. I'm sorry." Chidinma looked into his eyes and placed her hand over his. "I forgive you, Obina. But forgiveness doesn't come with restoration. Some things can't return. You are no longer part of our story." Obina nodded slowly, his breathing shallow. "I understand," he said, and with that he turned and walked away. Later that night, Obina sat at the old bridge, the place where he and Chidinma once shared roasted corn and whispered dreams. His chest tightened again, this time worse than before. He clutched his shirt, gasping for air, but there was no one nearby. No Amanda. No friends. No one to call his name. With the stars above and the wind carrying the distant sound of Zara's voice on a nearby radio, Obina collapsed on the sidewalk. The letter he had written earlier slipped from his pocket, fluttering onto the pavement. His last breath escaped not with glory, but with sorrow. And the city, ever alive, moved on. News of his death spread quietly, a whisper compared to the echo of Zara's voice. He died not because the world hated him, but because he had turned his back on the one heart that ever truly loved him. And by the time he realized it, life had moved on. The news of Obina's death didn't make headlines. No press release, no tribute, not even a whisper from the circles he once fought to enter. He was found slumped at the edge of the same bridge where he and Chidinma used to dream, with a worn-out wallet and a folded letter in his pocket. His body lay in the morgue for 3 days unclaimed, until a good Samaritan alerted a small blog that posted a short story. "Unknown man dies by roadside. Suspected heart attack. Identification pending." When Chidinma saw the blurry photo that accompanied the article, she paused. Her heart skipped, not in grief, but in solemn reflection. She recognized the sandals, the way his arm curled defensively over his chest. It was Obina. She didn't cry. She just closed the tab and stared out her office window, where Zara's face beamed from a billboard nearby. That night, she sat with Zara and told her the truth. Not the sugar-coated version. She told her how her father was once a good man, poor, hopeful, loving, and how ambition turned him into someone else. She explained how people sometimes forget the value of loyalty when gold blinds their eyes. Zara, mature beyond her years, listened silently, her eyes moist but steady. "Did he ever love us?" she asked softly. Chidinma held her close and said, "He did. But he loved the idea of success more." That was all Zara needed to know. They prayed for his soul that night, not with bitterness or anger, but with peace. Forgiveness is not always about the other person. Sometimes it's the final step to healing. Chidinma forgave him again in her heart, whispering a quiet farewell to the man who once shared her dreams, but lacked the courage to live them. A few days later, Chidinma arranged for Obina's burial. It was a simple ceremony, attended only by the workers from her foundation, a few former neighbors, and the priest. No Amanda. No old friends. Just the woman he abandoned, the one he thought would never rise. She paid for a modest tombstone and chose the words herself. "Here lies Obina. May the lessons of your life teach others the value of love." She didn't do it for him. She did it for Zara, to show her daughter that grace isn't about who deserves it, but about who chooses it. As they lowered his casket into the ground, the sky wept lightly. And just like that, the chapter closed on a man who once had everything: love, loyalty, a future, and lost it all in the pursuit of fleeting power. 1 year after Obina's passing, Chidinma stood before a crowd of thousands at the Women of Substance Global Conference in Abuja. Dressed in a flowing purple gown, she radiated elegance. Behind her, a screen displayed her journey: the one-room apartment, the uncompleted building, Zara's first stage performance, the moment her foundation reached 1,000 sponsored single mothers. The applause was thunderous as she took the microphone. "They told me I wouldn't make it," she began, "that I was too poor, too soft, too ordinary. But I'm here to tell you that grace grows in broken places." Her voice was steady, her words sharp, and her presence captivating. She spoke about resilience, motherhood, betrayal, and healing. But most importantly, she spoke about the power of choosing to rise when life throws you away. Zara, now 12, sat in the front row, surrounded by dignitaries, clapping proudly as her mother's story inspired the world. She had just released her second album and was set to go on a European tour. Her songs were no longer just about sorrow. They were about joy, transformation, and hope. People cried at her concerts, not because of the pain, but because of the light she carried. Together, Chidinma and Zara became more than mother and daughter. They were a movement. They built schools in poor communities, established music programs for orphan children, and funded housing for abandoned mothers. The very society that once mocked Chidinma now celebrated her as a national icon. Newspapers called her the woman who rose from the dust, and schools taught her story as a lesson in perseverance and dignity. At home, peace reigned. Their compound was filled with laughter, music, and sunlight. On weekends, Zara played the piano while Chidinma cooked jollof rice and sang along. Their bond was unbreakable, tested by fire, strengthened by pain, and now adorned with joy. One afternoon, as they sat on their balcony overlooking the city skyline, Zara turned to her mother and said, "Mummy, would you change anything if you could?" Chidinma smiled. "No, my love. Every heartbreak, every betrayal, every night I cried, it all led us here. We are who we are because we survived." They clinked their glasses of juice and watched the sunset together. And somewhere in the wind, the echoes of their journey danced like a song only they could truly understand. A song of victory, of survival, and of peace that comes only after the storm has passed. Thank you for watching this video. What did you learn from this story? Drop it in the comments. Please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel TOCHI Stories for M.